chat. Susanna. Susanna. What? We're starting. Oh, what? Ow! My buzz! This week we have Albert Ellis, who's going to tell us all about his history of eventing and hunting and polo. And he's an amazing storyteller that we've been listening to in the hunt field for the last bajillion years. And I look forward to hearing more details from us today.
Thank you for that glowing introduction, Sam. So I was wondering who had absolutely nothing to do today. Now I know. So I'm a little bit intimidated following a couple of headliners in Ann and Susanna. And has anybody else done this?
Dougie.
Dougie. Yeah, another one. Geez, I wish I'd been here to fact check him.
You know what, Albert? He was pretty good.
Really?
He was pretty good.
Your name came up a few times.
I can only imagine.
Talk about you quite a few times.
Oh God. So in any event, I'll start at the very beginning, which I was born in 1958. And Susanna, that kind of makes us peers.
Not quite.
Grew up in Gloucester, Mass, where my mother still lives. And so I was trying to determine how best to organize the chronology of my life in the equestrian world. And I didn't know if I should talk about the masters who I hunted with, or the events, the disciplines, either eventing or show jumping or polo, or various of the personalities I met along the way at various stages. But I think that the easiest way for me to determine my chronology is by identifying the horses, and then I can fit the horses into the buckets that represent the unfortunately long passage of time. So my first recollection of riding, we had a Shetland pony named Fanny, who lived in Gloucester, only lived in Gloucester, and lived in a chicken coop. And Fanny was a irascible little thing, and I remember learning how to fall off, and learning. Actually, she was a cart pony as well. So we had a little cart, and that was fun. We had a neighbor named Ron Strong, who's an excavating contractor, who's Sam, you may know Ron.
Yeah.
And he was one of my first babysitters, and he had a great love for horses. And so Ron was always dutiful in getting me on Fanny when he would come over to take care of us. And so I think when I was about 5, I graduated from Fanny and was able to start riding at Pine Grove Stables, which is the barn that was owned by, first Pat McCarthy, whose daughters were Patricia Murray, Dorothy Harrigan, and Helen Morse. Oh. And Helen Morse was certainly the lead equestrian and lead teacher out of that barn. She rode in many of the steeplechases over here at Willowdale, and was reputed to be quite a good jockey. And so she was a wonderful person to learn from, and we didn't necessarily. I don't think we learned the way what people are taught now. I mean, we just kind of learn by doing, and so she was the first person to take me out on the hunt, and by this time I'd graduated to another pony named Flivver, and I can't remember what breed he was. He must have had a little bit of Hackney in him. But he was not the easiest thing in the world to hunt. But I think I was on him for a couple of years. And then there was a horse at the barn. Now maybe I'm 9, named Chaster, and I think old man McCarthy was still alive, and I just kept asking him, can I buy Chaster, can I buy Chaster? And every time it was a quarter. I must have paid $300 in quarters for Chaster, and never got him home. So that was fun, and then we only hunted, and then I think when I was about 10, I started participating in the big shows in town, which were the St. Paul's show on the schooling field, the Myopia show, and the Rockport horse show, which was a show that was run by Charlie Lane down at CV Farms in Rockport. And so that's where I got my introduction to competition, and I quickly learned that I already knew that I was a pretty competitive person. I didn't like not doing well, and at least in things that involved horses and athletics and that sort of stuff. And my mother had, at the same time, the eventing bug. Hey, hi, how are you? Had taken hold in at Myopia, or in Hamilton. Iris had run for years the Groton House event. Was there a period of time when Groton House did not run between, or was it a seamless? Was it seamless through?
I can't remember because it was my daughter was in Pony Club, and we bought her a hunting pony through the that wonderful West family over beyond Myopia, the mother of that family. Anyway, and then she got into Pony Club, and then she got swept away by eventing. Is that right?
Yeah, I just wondered if there was a time
Yeah,
between.
well, Ann was saying that they had the first Groton House event in '57,
And that was Iris.
and Iris did that. And then when Ann started it, it ran for 40 years, and it ended in 2020. So she would have started it in '80 or something.
Yeah, I just couldn't remember if there was a time when
stopped
it.
for a few years.
That's what I thought.
And
That's
then Anne took it back over when she came back
from Brussels. Yeah. So in any event, the Neil had gotten the bug. Well, first of all, my first master was Bunny Sears, and then I think when I was about 12, maybe Neil became master, and at the same time Neil had started running the Ledyard Farm horse trials, and I don't know if any of you know or knew Neil. He tended to go all in on things, whether it was polo or eventing or business or whatever he did with a great deal of enthusiasm and skill, and also was wonderful about bringing people along and creating an atmosphere of participation. I mean, he was a wonderful leader, but he was also wanted to make sure that others enjoyed what he enjoyed, which I thought was great. So I think my mother started eventing. My mother obviously was hunting all the time. I don't know when she became field master, but she was field master and treasurer of the hunt for a long time. And she was apparently very intimidating to many people, which I suspect delighted her immensely. And she was great she was great as the treasurer. So Neil was running Ledyard. My mother got involved in eventing, and my mother had brought over from Ireland in the late 50s, mid 50s, late 50s, a couple of Irish steeplechase mares, one of whom she was able to hunt for some period of time. The other was just way too rank to hunt in the docile myopia field. And at the time, the myopia field was not particularly docile. And this mare then became a brood mare, was sent down to Philip Hoffman's in New Jersey, and was bred to the first Holsteiner stallion that was brought to the U.S. And his name was Hercules. And from this mare, we had a series of horses that some of which were rideable, some of which were not. But the one who was the most rideable was a horse named Rowdy that my mother started eventing when I was about 11 or 12. And I then started eventing with her with my little pony. Well, actually, it was a full-size pony. It was 14.2. His name was Sam, and Sam was a Connemara. And Connemars are, as you all probably know, are great. Have big hearts, good jump, loves to have a job, and Sam and I had a lot of fun, but he didn't like ditches, and so that was somewhat problematic in the event field. At the same time as my mother started eventing, we were always continuing to participate in the various shows. The myopia show was, of course, the highlight of the season for a whole host of reasons. But the biggest draw was that at the time the show jumping was held on what is now Winthrop Field, and during the show jumping, there would be a tremendous number of cars lining the show jumping arena, and it was really exciting to watch. And so I think I was sort of bit by the show jumping bug then, although I didn't do any for a couple years later. So I think I also did Pony Club, and I was terrible at Pony Club. Tim Murray and I had decent horses. I had then inherited Rowdy because my mother had a spectacular fall at the Pucker Brush event in Maine. We used to go to events all over the place. We would go, the first of the season was always Pucker Brush, and Neil would bring an entourage and enough food to feed like whatever town we were in. and he would put on these incredible spreads the nights that we were there. So we would go to Pucker Brush, we would go up to GMHA. I think Huntington came a little bit later. Tamarack definitely came a little bit later. Hitching Post. And then at the end of the year the last one of the year was always Shepley Hills, which is out in Groton, Mass. All the others were kind of in the Upper Valley, which is became fortuitous for me at a later juncture. So now I have also been riding my father's horse, Great Scott. And when Great Scott was a Canadian bred, we used to get a lot of horses out of Guelph, Canada. And he was a Canadian bred that had a great heart and a great jump. And so I started taking him in the junior stadium class. And I don't know if it was because there were only 3 people in the class. I don't remember how big the class was, or that Great Scott was allergic to wood, but we won that class 3 years in a row. And so we were able to retire that trophy, which was, at whatever age I was, 16, I think that seemed like a really big deal for me. So when I'm hunting Rowdy, and Neil is the master, every hunt is like a steeplechase or a cross country run. I mean, we are going all out over reasonably long runs and often over event fences. And so, those of us who were eventing got these great schools out in the hunt field that would serve us well in the cross country phase of events going forward. I'll jump ahead to I then go off to boarding school. I actually know one person at the boarding school that I went to, which was a school of 1,300 at the time, and that was Ray Stecker. Ray Stecker happened to be the person from whom I got Sam. So not only so I knew him through the riding world, but he was a senior. He was gone, and then I kind of found my way. But in my sophomore year, I had been doing a lot of eventing in the summer, the year before, and through the summer, and so I don't even know if we had to qualify at the time, but I was riding in the preliminary division in Ledyard 73, and so my mother was obviously at boarding school. My mother was keeping the horse fit, and at school, I had to figure out which was the sport I could take that had the fewest competitions, because I never wanted to be there on the weekends, because on the weekends I could come home and at least get on for a couple hours in the 6 weeks leading up to Ledyard, and I think Ledyard was the third week of October or something like that. So I was able to come home and ride in Ledyard. It was 2 weeks before Ledyard, or maybe it was 3 weeks before Ledyard. My mother calls me and said, Neil really wants you to do some volunteer work. Everybody in the community is volunteering. So he really wants you to come and work with Claudia King and go around and, prune the roots and spray paint the rocks on the cross country course. And I said, oh God, really? And so I came home. I didn't come home, actually. I stayed at the beautiful Ledyard farmhouse with Mrs. Eyre and Claudia, and in the morning we would diligently get up and join the crew and go work the cross country course. And we did that for a couple of weeks leading up to the event. The event comes, and my mother's done an exquisite job of keeping the mare fit. I was never a particularly disciplined dressage rider. It kind of bored me a little bit. However, it's a mandatory thing in 3D eventing. And so Friday, I don't know, I may have come home on Thursday and ridden a little bit on Thursday. I might have just come home on Friday. But Friday, it's time for me to go walk down the cinder track. The Murray's, or Pine Grove Stables, was at the end of the gas line that runs between the two polo fields. And so I can't tell you how many times I went out that track to the schooling field, eating dust the whole way for summer after summer after summer after horse after horse after horse. But on this occasion, on this cool autumn day, I was just heading to Gibney Field, where my mother had set up all the dressage. My mother was the dressage queen of the local events. I think probably because she was the only one who people felt confident knew how to do square roots. And to make a dressage ring perfectly square, you better know how to do square roots. So she did the rings for Groton House, and she did the rings for Pingreaves and did Ledyard. And I was amazed when I came to the Gibney Field and saw, I think there were 5 rings laid out, and it looked like the Yorkshire Hills. I had no idea that Gibney Field had such undulations in it. And later, I asked, why hasn't anybody ever made an effort to flatten Gibney Field? Because with equipment we have now, it'd be relatively easy to do. And the answer that I got fairly consistently was it's about a 280-yard field. A polo field should be 300 yards. Since it's 280, and since it has the undulations, it plays like a 300-yard field. So at any event, I'm warming up, rolling around the dressage rings, and then my ring specifically, getting ready to enter. The mare is just hot, and she's pulling, and it's just a nightmare. And so and there's this huge crowd gathering, and there's a lot of noise and a lot of flashes, and it's just, I can't understand it. And boy, she really couldn't understand it. And I remember going into getting ready to enter at A, proceed to X, sitting trot, halt, salute. I entered the ring, proceed to X, halt, salute, and the mare does a 90-degree turn on the forehand. And I'm looking then at the ring right next to me, and Princess Anne has come in at exactly the same time, thus the crowd. So, needless to say, I did not finish particularly well in the dressage, but I finished, and I was able to keep her in the ring, barely. Then, this was my first 3-day event, and so this was the first time I'd ever actually done roads and tracks, and then steeplechase, and then roads and tracks again, and then the endurance phase. And so we started on Saturday. The first roads and tracks phase was an out and back at Appleton, and then there was a beautiful steeplechase course set up on Appleton, and then we did the roads and tracks back to the start at Ledyard, and the mare was going home. I mean, that was the home direction. And she was like, oh my God. And she was fit, and she was hot, and she'd just done, steeplechase for the first time in her life. And she said, this is fun. And she was lunging and pulling my arms out. But somehow we made it to the start of the cross country. And Dr. Tebow is there at the vet check. I mean, any of you, obviously Susanna, Dr. Tebow and Franz, Dr. Tebow is a wonderful local vet who, kept us all on sound horses for years and years and years. And the mare her pulse was so high, they were about to not let me do the cross country course. And Dr. Tebow kept saying, oh no, this mare recovers quickly, she recovers quickly. And sure enough, she did recover. So I was able to set out on the cross country course. And I'd heard that a lot of people were having trouble with the Bugali drop, which is I don't know if any of you know the layout of Ledyard.
It's horrifying.
Yeah,
It's horrifying. That fence is horrifying.
There's a dark corner over by the marsh, and in that corner there was a drop. You could come out of the light into the darkness, and then there was a drop, a ditch, and then a couple of banks up, and then a vertical coming out, and people were having trouble with it. And so I was tipped that off about that, and people were also having trouble with a couple places on the course where there were some routes that have been marked, but routes nonetheless that are inevitable on any cross-country course. And I was sailing around the course, and at some point I realized, Neil wanted Claudia and me to come see this course, see where every rock was, where every route was, and he did us a great favor by, imploring us to come, volunteer, and it served both of us well, and we went around clean and fast, and then same with Stadium. Let's see what.
The year that Princess Anne came, that you rode, that was the first international 3-day in the country.
Right.
It was the first international 3-day in the country.
Whitbread beer.
Yeah.
Whitbread beer was the sponsor. I don't think anybody had
Yes.
heard of Whitbread beer
And the
before
banner
or
still
since.
hangs in the indoor.
I know Whitbread beer.
The banner is still lettered in the indoor, but it was a big deal because it was the very first one in the entire country that Neil, he brought the crew and he set everything up and.
Oh my God, it was an amazing
It was
spectacle.
a huge deal. It set the stage for what we now know as eventing in the country, not just here. And
The
imagine
fence
the
you're talking
land.
about, is that the one that's still there?
It's still
overgrown?
there, but it's really overgrown, so you can't see it.
It's like a hexagon.
Yes, you
Yeah,
can barely
I
see
was
the
trying to think
fencing,
of
that
it.
kind of.
Which one is this, Michelle?
Bulga-
Oh.
Bugali.
I was just trying to.
Yeah.
And then there's the coffin too.
Yeah, that's-
but you can't
Was
see
the
that.
coffin tougher than Bugali?
The coffin as such had not been built yet. The coffin came in 1975.
Is that the
Because
one on the
my
front
mother
tree?
and I were there.
I'm sorry?
My mother and I met Neil Senior there. He explained the whole content of what was, because we were from Marblehead and I was a sailing person. And I just wanted to go because I had the horse bug,
Yep.
in my teens. And we met Mr. Ayer Senior at the coffin jump and he explained the course.
You know, it's
and-
really funny because I didn't ride in '75, but I was standing next to Neil at the coffin, and this woman from Canada whose family hosted the event. What was the event out by Bromont? But it wasn't Bromont. It was another one, and I can't. Lavelle, does that make sense? In any event, I was saying, boy, this woman was just having a hard time. She, refused 3 times, and then she was out. And I said, boy, that didn't go very well, did it? Neil, and I guess I was a little bit derogatory, and Neil turned to me and said, Albert, that's her father right there. Oh God. Okay, so where am I? So now we're in 1973.
How old are you now? I'm trying to
I'm
picture you.
15.
Okay.
I'm 15. I guess around the same time, and maybe when I was 14, I remember being at a picnic or a cookout at GMHA, and Tim Murray and I were always evented together. We always went in the same van. We did everything together. And John Costello was also another one, Bobby's older brother, and we were sitting at this picnic table at GMHA, and we looked around and we realized, boy, there are a lot of girls in this sport. And that was, and that didn't change. Actually, the first girl to make my heart flutter was the following year, and so my first girlfriend ended up being Karen Lendy, and she is a wonderful person, a beautiful writer, and was always, my biggest fan, very encouraging. But I evented a couple more years, and then I went off to college, and she went on to greatness. And so I'm in college. I don't ride much during college, except I would come home on Thanksgiving, and I would always ride in the Thanksgiving hunt. So where are we now? Now we're at about up to 1976. So that's when I would enter college. So I think that by then Russell might have become joint master. If not, it was shortly thereafter. Too bad Kim's not here. She would know off the top of her head. But Russell, we'd also travel with Russell to Maryland and hunt with the Green Spring Valley, or go down to Virginia and hunt with Farmington. We had our first. We also had broodmares down in Farmington at Jill Summers' farm, and I always loved staying at Jill Summers. And she had a beautiful home. She and her husband Paul had a beautiful home on Barracks Road, where they had a lovely library. And I remember going into the library and picking out some Faulkner books, and there would always be Jill. What inspired me to write this book was, and then he'd go on for a paragraph or so, and and then sign it Poppy. So that was obviously Jill was Faulkner's daughter.
Mm.
And as the world is small, that house actually ended up being owned by the president of UVA when the Summers moved further out on Barracks Road, and the daughter of the president of UVA was a year ahead of me at Dartmouth, and a fellow lacrosse player that I knew very well. So I kind of take a break from riding for the most part for quite a long time. Between college, I think I rode in one event. After college, I rode my mother was doing something at Huntington Farm, and so she brought up a horse, and I rode a horse in Huntington Farm. And a couple of guys from my lacrosse team came and said, "Wow, this is really weird. This is, I can't believe you do this." And that's I couldn't disagree. So let's see what happened. Now, Russell's definitely master. I've gone to Colorado for a couple of years. I come back and I'm riding. I meet Miranda, and I end up marrying Miranda and Angela and Rosie, and then transplant my horse, Bumpy, to Turner Hill Farm, which was wonderful. And so I did a lot of hunting during those years, and I definitely remember Russell was in charge. At this time also, there was no such thing as professional staff. I mean, we were, always chipping in, whipping, or hunting the hounds, or, doing whatever it took. Which brings me to another thing. When I've never felt comfortable when we're hunting and we go along and we see some poor dog that's on his own property that's about to become the quarry of our unruly hounds, and we start yelling, "Cur dog, cur dog," and I said, that's and I couldn't understand where the heck the expression "cur dog" came from, so I did a little research, and you all probably already know this, but a cur dog, and I'll give you an example of a cur dog in a minute. Well, in any event, it was originally a cur dog was a British fox hunting term. There was actually a cur dog breed in Great Britain that is now extinct. But today there are dogs that are known as cur dogs in the United States, and most of them are now purebreds that were once considered mutts, among which is the Louisiana Catahoula leopard dog. Well, our daughter Lily has a partner named Townsend Hall, who has a Catahoula dog, and when they were starting to get together, Lily was living on this beautiful ranchette in Topanga, which has been in the news a lot of late. Lily's house has not burned. They've been very fortunate. Have you heard anything today about?
No, it hasn't burned, but it's really bad there right now because the winds have picked up.
So in any event, they're not out of the woods, but so Townsend and Sugar, the Catahoula, move onto the farm, onto the little ranch, and Lily starts calling me, desperate. This dog nips. She's drawn blood twice, and what should I do? What should I do? I mean, Townsend won't get rid of the dog, and I know dogs pretty well, and so I thought about it for a while, and I came up with a suggestion that I thought was by far the most practical, which was to get liability insurance, which she did. About 3 weeks later, I get the call that they have to leave their house on the property, because Sugar has gone down to the ring at the stable, started chasing a horse around the ring with a rider on it, and the rider fell, broke her pelvis, broke her shoulder. It did not end well. That, as lovely a dog as she is a cur dog. So I'm back in Ipswich now, and I think that Miranda and the Littles were very good friends, and the Hartnets and many of the people in the polo community. And so Don starts badgering me, you know, you gotta play polo, you gotta play polo, you gotta play polo. I'd never really played polo in my life. I might have stick and balled a little bit in the arena at night when the Harvard polo was out there in 1975 or 4 or whatever. But I'd never played, and I was reluctant to get involved on a whole host of levels, not the least of which is that I had heard that it could be an expensive sport. Ultimately, I succumbed to pressure, but I made a deal with Don. I would start playing polo if he started hunting. So he did, and I did. And that must have been 1985, 86, 85, 86. And I absolutely loved polo. And when I started playing, and it was like, I'd never done anything so much fun in my life. You know, I was a decent enough rider so that riding was not an issue for me, and I had hand-eye coordination, so I was very fortunate to take to the game pretty quickly. So the first year I'm playing with on a 12-goal team with Ricky Hartnett, Doolittle, and Don, and we do pretty well. I have one horse that Don had bought for me that I had not asked for, that just showed up, that he had me reimburse him for. And then I would just borrow horses from him or Ricky or whomever. So at the end of the season, so now I'm a -1. First year, just started, a -1. Don calls me, of course, and says, I have a friend who needs you to come to Oklahoma City. And I said, why? And he said, well, he has a 12-goal team. He's out of Lexington, Bruce Hunley. He's the owner of Saxony Farms. He's out of Kentucky, Lexington, and he has won the Circuit 12-goal and is qualified for the national semifinals. His -1, number 1 player, fell in the last game and broke his collarbone. So I said, you know, why not? And I didn't have to think for very long before I picked up the phone and called Billy Mulcahy to ask Billy if he would help me with this odyssey. And Billy, bless his heart, gave me 3 great horses. I had one, I got another one from Don, and Billy and another guy drove the horses out to Oklahoma City, and I went out there and played in the semifinal game. We didn't have a practice game. I just showed up and played, and it was great because I'd never played on Bermuda grass before, and playing here at Myopia, you get divots and, you know, the bent grass and bluegrass. It doesn't hold the ball up, but Bermuda grass is fabulous about teeing the ball up. And so I had a great time, and we ended up winning the semifinals. So we stayed out there for another week and went to Dallas and played in the finals at a club that was called Willow Bend, which is no longer there, and we won the finals. And so you know, I'd been playing polo for all of 4 months, and I was on a team that won the national 12 hole. And needless to say, I had the bug by then. And then I continued to play, and largely with Don and Ricky and Du, and until I started moving up. I went from a -1 to a 0 to a 1 to a 2 and to a 3, and I think when I became a 1, by then one of them had gone down, so we could still keep the 12 goals team together, but the following year we couldn't. But that gave me the opportunity to play with people like Andrew and Adam Snow and Terry, and we had wonderful times. We also did, polo was very different then. I mean, now there are very few clubs left like Myopia. I think Mashonack might be one of them up in Millbrook, but for the most part, polo is now, you know, private individuals hosting private tournaments, but for some of the national tournaments. But when we were playing in the 80s and early 90s, we would do great road trips down to Brandywine and play with the Joneses, or go up to Mashonack and play with whomever was up there, Oakley Thorne and that crew. It had some of the, you know, it was really wonderful seeing different countryside, playing on different fields and playing with different people. I remember one time we were down in Brandywine. I was playing with Terry and Andrew Snow and Dana Hersey. Dana Hersey was actually a pretty good player. I think at one point he was at least a 1-goal player, maybe 2. And we were playing on a field that had rained a lot, and so about a third of the field we couldn't play on. It was literally blocked off. And we were playing with this family that had been banned from the club for playing against, I should say. This family that had been banned for the club for a number of years, and this was the first tournament that they'd been allowed to come back and play at Brandywine. And in about the 4th period, Dana runs into this guy, a legal hit, knocks him down, and the guy falls and is knocked out. He's the son of the father who had been banned from the club. The father went ballistic and was trying to smash Dana in the head with his mallet. And I kept riding behind the guy, trying to hook him. and so Dana escaped unscathed, and I think that we may have suspended play. It was also
He ran off into the cornfield, Dana, all the way into the field. He escaped that guy. Off the field into the cornfield to hide.
Yeah. And then the following year we were down there, and that's when Terry took that terrible fall.
Oh, yeah.
Terry had a really bad fall and hurt his head, but he recovered.
Yeah.
So let's see, what year are we in now? So anybody bored yet?
That was fascinating.
Very good, Albert.
So I think we're up to about 1987. And I think that probably in 87 might have been the year that we went to England. Russell used to hunt in England a lot and would buy all of his horses, well, you know this better than anyone,
Yes.
through a dealer in Leicestershire named Barbara Rich.
Barbara Rich.
And Russell came back.
Your year is exactly correct. Your
Wow.
year is exactly correct. In Hersey, the game, all of it, 1987.
And Russell comes back from one of his port-soaked trips, and reports to me that he's found a beautiful horse at Barbara Rich's, but he's just a little bit too small for him. and asked me if I'd like to go take a look at it. And I wanted a horse. I needed a horse. Well, does anybody ever need a horse? Let's just leave it at I wanted a horse. So Miranda and we were actually over there for some other reason too. There was some.
Getting clothes, hunting clothes.
No, there was a wedding. There was
There
some
was a
wedding.
wedding too. Yeah.
There was, but hunting clothes was also on the agenda.
Well, after the fitting, and you have to go back for the fitting. It's actually a big deal.
It was a huge
It
deal.
was a huge
for us.
deal.
Was that?
Very exciting.
Everything was
the whole
custom, so
Oh,
you're
that's right.
probably getting measured. Maybe
Several times.
Yeah, it was
custom
at
hand caps, Mr. Patty's.
Hall.
all the things.
Hall was the name of the tailor
Yes.
in Market Harbor.
Yes.
All the things.
Um,
Swain, egg, grapes, all of it.
Yeah, by appointment of Russell Clark
Exactly.
and,
all
and
of
the
it.
Prince. And
All of it, yes.
Russell would always buy clothes where the Prince of Wales bought clothes. In any event, I tried this horse at Barbara's, and he was about 16'2", but he was a big Irish bred horse that had an incredible, jump. Got his knees up really well, and I thought, man, 16'2" is a little small for me, but he's a warm blood. I have a funny feeling he's got a little bit more growing to go. So we bought him and brought him home, and he did grow, and he ended up being about 17'1", and it was through this horse. He was a natural show jumper, and in my first experience show jumping with him was going to the autumn fairs and doing the night schooling shows that used to exist in various locations. Deerfield, yeah, exactly. And there was one in Maine. I can't remember what that was, but Don, the Pied Piper, always wanted to do this, and he was always up for an adventure. And I said, sure, I'll do it too. And so I started show jumping this horse a little bit, and I think I may have taken him in the myopia show or another schooling show at one point, but the Boston Jumper Classic was also being started, and
I think it was the Ritz-Carlton at that stage. Early
exactly,
on.
yeah,
Ritz-Carlton.
yeah, and it was over on.
The team.
I'm sorry.
It was at the team at the time, right? On the lawn.
Right,
Brackenside.
right,
Yeah.
right at Brackenside,
Yeah.
and so I went over. I think it was the first year that it was going on, and so I went over and I looked at the fences, and I said, "Geez, I think this horse can do these fences," and so I entered the class. I had been being helped schooling with Michael Keogh and with Jerry Kenny, and then I think with Mark.
You came up to jump the water.
And that's how I met you.
Right.
And that would have been.
He brought Seaford up to jump the water, and he said, "Mark, I got this horse. It's a hunt horse, whatever. I think he can really jump." You came with someone. Who came with you? There were two of you. Anyway, they come up with these horses. They want to jump the water.
It was probably Donald.
Permanent. It wasn't Don. They're permanent water. So he anyway he gets out there, and Mark is a very quiet person. He doesn't really talk very much at all. Right? He's very very few words. But he's he's teaching, he's talking, and he gets to the end of it. He says, "Albert, this horse really can jump." He says, "You're right. This is a real horse."
Yeah. So I'd seen the fences, and I entered in the class. I entered in the speed class, and I entered into the Grand Prix class. I didn't know that the fences were not put up to the Grand Prix. So they were like 4 feet, and I think they went up to about 5 feet with some pretty good spreads. And when we first did the speed class, I remember. I shouldn't keep saying I remember, but I do remember. I don't know how I remember. He did really well in the speed class. I think it was second or third in the speed class, and then came the big class, and I sort of had my heart in my throat, and there was a huge triple that was a vertical, an oxer and a vertical, and I thought if I can get through that, I'll be okay. And that was about 2/3 of the way through the class, and he flew through it. I think we had one rail, so we're not in the ribbon that year, but then the following year, I think he was third in the big class, and again did well in the speed class. And I think I rode him one more time in the Grand Prix. Then I realized that his talents were being wasted on me, and I brought him up to Mark and Wendy, and he was up there for what, a couple of years.
Not that long. Mark rode him for the first year because Mark took him on the cuff and he rode him himself.
Yeah.
He loved that. That was one of my all-time favorite horses that I've ever. I used to keep him fit because he was hard to keep fit. He was a lazy horse, and he was a
Like me.
chunky walking horse. And so I'd take him out to that
Irish, wasn't
hayfield,
it?
but he would gallop for me because I'd just get up off his back and I would pretend he was running away with me. I'd go whoa, and then he'd be like guys. So he would gallop for me, and I would take him out there and just gallop him every morning, and then he would train. But that horse jumped the American Invitational with one down.
And we're back in the barn at Russell's, like, when you sold that one lie.
Right.
Why didn't we get to keep that one?
One down in the American Invitational camper with that little Amy Shaftmaster.
Yeah. And was he horse of the year one year?
Yes, she was AGA Rookie of the Year with that horse.
Yeah.
He was she was show jumping horse of the year.
So
Amazing
What was his name?
career.
Seaford. And then in 1991, I think, well, I know it's 1991 because you just sent the video.
Right.
I had, so I took him in the Groton House preliminary division. It was a horse trials. I don't think it was, no, it wasn't a 3-day, horse trials. And, he just loped around a cross country course, and he was a pretty good mover too. So we did, I think we were in the ribbon somewhere in that, but I'd never evented him before, never evented him since. But he was just,
You took him in that one event?
Yes.
Oh my God. You guys all have to see this video because like Bobby Costello's in it, Susan Gordon, like all the old eventers at Groton House. It was so cool and then when I saw you, I'm like, oh my God, that's so cool. I had heard you event it. Yeah, you can share it with whoever.
Yeah, he was just an amazing horse. I've fantasized about show jumping ever since, but probably not in my future. But I kept playing polo for about another year. I ended up playing I think I played in 3 East Coast Opens. We won the handicap one year. By now I had a great string of 6 horses that were all sound and athletic and willing and straight and did everything I could ask for. And it's very important when you're playing polo to have really fit horses, really good tact, really skilled horses, and it's also great to have really good people on the ground. And my favorite help on the ground of all time is Susanna.
Oh, that's surprising.
I
can't even get over 1 foot.
You were fabulous. You would always come.
Was I cursing at you a lot?
No, you would come and I'd get off and hand you a horse and you'd walk the horse around and you were wonderful.
Oh, I was very proud of the fact that I was a hot walker.
Yeah. Well,
I was really in it, but I wasn't in it.
You were the best. You were the best.
I was really appalled at how the horses got so thin. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't really grasp how the polo pony looked so different from the hunt horses. And I just felt that they were not being fed enough and they really didn't enjoy their life. But I tell you, now that my family's in polo and we're playing the game, I don't know if Franz's boys would ever have really started to ride, and they are all really good riders now, and the ponies have taught them. And we were so lucky to get the ponies that were older, well-schooled. When we started out, we didn't know anything, and I was kind they were down in the ring here, and Sissy Snow, blessed woman, was here teaching the Harvard girls. And they had all come from barrel racing and God knows what background. And Franz's boys were up there going, no, who's in the ring now? What are they doing there? That's so boring. Who wants to do that? So he just they couldn't resist going down and seeing what girls were doing on these horses. And Sissy right off just slammed them on these wonderful ponies, bareback. Hit the horse in the rear and off they went. And didn't you, Franz, remember, they couldn't have enough of it.
Yeah.
You know, and I had such respect for polo ponies because I really thought they were being misused, mistreated, and that goddamn whip thing, but I got rid of that damn whip quick, boy. That host, what is his name? Frank?
All right, we're getting sidetracked here.
This is my best story. So, well, Sissy was still here, and that whip, I got a little group together, and we came up with the Myopia Polo Pony Welfare Committee.
Oh, right.
And we had such great people working on that committee, and they really knew what they were talking about. And we really got rid of a lot of that stuff that bothered me so much as a 15-year-old little hot walking witch. And that program has been taken straight across the country. And it was the first time I really, I think, of all the committees I've worked with, where the people were so different, but they all contributed so much. And it was all for the welfare of the horse and the skill of the game. And Sissy did that. I don't know how many of you remember Sissy, but she's doing that down south now, but she's taking care of a lot of abandoned animals, replacing them and everything. But I have so much respect now for polo, really, and those ponies. I think
They're great horses.
king of all horse
Over
world.
anything.
Yeah,
And
they're great
the
horses.
great irony for me is that not only in show jumping, but in polo, the most important foundation of either of those disciplines is flat work.
Yeah.
And I think by then, 28 or whatever it was when I started doing this, I was mature enough that I would actually spend 10 minutes a day trying to do a little bit of flat work. I mean, it's no coincidence that polo ponies can stop on a dime, turn 180 degrees, and be back at full speed in 3 strides. I mean, that doesn't necessarily come totally naturally. And then also riding show jumpers to the base of the fence and being able to rate them for each stride is not something that any horse does naturally. That reminds me of a story that I had gotten hurt playing lacrosse, and I didn't know it my junior year, and I was riding at Turner Hill, schooling over some fences in preparation for the jumper classic, and Michael Keogh was on the ground helping me, and I was going over these big fences, and we were doing an exercise where I would try to get the horse into as close to the base of the fence as possible, and then have him come up and over, and sort of a kind of a mock puissance exercise. And I got Seaford in a little bit too tight once. He went up, I went forward and smacked my head on his neck, and I became paralyzed to my waist. I subsequently learned when I jumped into Squam Lake in 1996, when Ann Seymour was 4 months pregnant with Isabella, and I became paralyzed from the neck down in 6 feet of water, that I had herniated a disc playing lacrosse, and it took me, it took just over the years that my spinal cord canal had closed down so much.
Saved you.
What's that?
Lily saved you.
Well, Yeah, Lily and Whitney were in the water with me. Maybe Lily saved me by yelling.
Lily was like, it's real, something's happening, he's not just fooling around.
And Seymour jumped in and pulled my lifeless arms over a kickboard, and I said,
Oh, God.
I've broken my neck and I've paralyzed from the neck down. It was exactly what had happened. So I regained my sensation, obviously, and within a couple of weeks I was having a cervical fusion. And my spinal cord canal had been closed down about 80%. So it was going to happen at some point. It just is a good thing it happened where there were people around and not one of the 20 times during the summer when I'd swum by myself in front of the rocks in front of our house. Let's see. Who were some other people that were, how much time? Oh, God. I can't stop without acknowledging a couple of people, a couple of friends of mine. You know, so the Murrays and the Keoghs and we were sort of the three Catholic families in the community. My father was Irish Catholic. My mother was not. But you know, so we were the kids that always had to go to church, and always, you know, we were kind of a little bit of in a different social class, I'll call it, and we became very tight. And one of my best friends over the years was always Patrick, and he was just the most fun, lovely, encouraging person, and his father was as well. His father always was really helpful for me at shows, setting rails, and just encouraging. And I miss Patrick tremendously. Carla was we got a couple of Jack Russells from Carla, and Carla and Patrick would babysit our Jack Russells when we would go away, and I loved coming. I'd want to go away just so I could leave the Jack Russells there to give me an excuse to stop by and sit with Patrick for a while and hear his stories and his sense of humor. So he was an invaluable asset to the community, as was Michael, and as is Michael. Different personality, but has has contributed a tremendous amount to a lot of people's well-being in the horse world. Provided a lot of people a lot of horses, and I should probably thank Neil, who did so much for so many, and got really brought attention to the event world, to this area. I mean, it was incredible what was going on here in the 70s with the team.
Oh, it was amazing. It was just, I mean,
and 80s. And
yeah, the 80s and the late 70s and early 80s here was just, it was unbelievable. This is where it all started. This is where it happened. You couldn't go downtown to the Hunter's Inn without running into now, which would be a gold medalist. They were just, everybody was there. Mike Plum, Bruce Davidson,
Karen.
even before them, David O'Connor. Those are
It's
the later
also
people.
why we really need to protect. Area 1 has so few events, and then those are committed to it. GMHA and Huntington are putting a lot of money into it, hitching posts. But it's historic here. I mean, this is where it all started. It would be very sad.
Well, just think of where you could go before. Think of an international 3-day, how you had, of course they don't have them now, but you had roads and tracks, you had steeplechase, you had the cross-country course. So you're going from Ledyard over to Appleton Farms, all the way back, and that's all land that you can get through some of it, Appleton Farms you can go, but a lot of it isn't there anymore to hunt through or to go through, and so what is left really needs to continue to stay.
Be protected.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, but there was one weekend, and I don't know if you'll remember this, we had, and the stars just aligned, so it was a Groton House weekend, and it was what we would call the second weekend. There used to be 2 weekends. The first weekend was,
Groton House 1 and Groton House 2, right?
right, and they only had, it wasn't even novice, it was pre-training, training, and preliminary. And then the second weekend was intermediate and advanced. Or they might have done preliminary, intermediate, and advanced, I forget exactly. But the second weekend was the big weekend. And so you had all the big people. And everybody would stay for a week. They would come in early, they would have the tents for the horses, every hotel, everywhere was booked, all these people would come. Then they had a horse show. So it would be end of season, didn't matter which one, there was a horse show going on. They would have the East Coast Open or a fancy polo game. Well, one weekend, everything happened at the same time. This place was just booming with trucks and trailers and horses and the who's who, and it was crazy. You would go downtown to get into the Hunter's Inn for dinner, or you would go to the Weather Vane, and at one point, the line to get into the Weather Vane matched the line to get into the Hunter's Inn, and they met on the street. Well, everybody just started talking. And the entire Railroad Avenue, that's Railroad?
Yeah.
It was just this one big party. Everybody was just talking, it was all horse people, and so that's how, busy and horse related, it was really,
The line to the Weather Vane is still that long.
well, it meant the Hunter's Inn, which is now not even the Black Cow, I don't know
Yeah,
what
it's something else.
Yeah, so it was the place to be, and just imagine that many horses and people and activities and income for the businesses and the town. Yeah, it was really great. I mean, it was the team, Jack Legoff, the clinics, it was really amazing. It was quite the place. Do you remember that weekend? That everything just sort of happened all in the same weekend for some reason? It was, it was a big polo game. It was Groton House weekend.
Oh yeah, I mean the East Coast Open would have been going on at the same time as Groton House.
Exactly, it was crazy.
And
It
at that
was
time,
just huge.
So then there were,
Right?
12 teams coming in, 12, 20-year-old teams coming into Hamilton. I mean, it was remarkable.
You would go out in the morning, and I think I had said this one time at one of these, a couple weeks ago when Dougie was here, that you would go to the schooling field. You would hack over to the schooling field, and it would be so busy with other people hacking through the schooling field. You were like, oh, I just wanted a quiet hack. And it was so busy, just a regular weekday. Patrick would have 6 or 7 people with him. Mrs. Murray would have her whole riding school.
Yeah.
It was great just to go hack through there. It was always busy, always full. So.
I've already spoken too long, but I have to acknowledge a couple more horses. Times Square, I didn't say anything about Times Square. He was a great hunter, and I took him in a few events, and I ended up riding him on the Area 1 team, and we competed up in Jokers Hill in Toronto. That was another fun event. Bumpy.
That's the one.
Yeah, what did you say about Bumpy? Because he was
was really important. I really liked him.
Bumpy was a beautiful bay. 17-1 thoroughbred. He didn't have the biggest heart in the world. I did take him in a few.
The Hunter Trials.
I took him in the Hunter Trials. I did take him in a couple of Groton House events. But he really likes being in the paddock with his friends. And who could blame him? And then, a whole slew of polo ponies that I won't even get into. But I guess more than anything, I have to thank all the horses in my life that really gave me so much pleasure and excitement and participation in so many different disciplines, and it was really kind of remarkable. It was a good run.
Yeah, well done. Still going on.
Great job.